here has ever relied on a map to make sense of their surroundings? I'm seeing a lot of hands. What if I told you that maps don't just orient us, they train our perception? Let me explain. Here you're seeing a map of the Mississippi River in the center, but this could be any river, typically drawn as a thin blue squiggly line marking the border separating land from water. Most dynamic systems are frozen like this into a single moment in time, typically prioritizing the most convenient or manageable one. In the case of the river, this is the non-flooding season. These representations normalize a single condition within a larger hydrologic cycle and treat everything else as deviation. But a river is a living system. It swells, it recedes, it expands, it contracts, it thrusts and trickles down the delta. Sometimes it even flows backwards. That dynamism is the river. Let's take a look at another map. Here you're seeing a map of the Mississippi River again, but drawn a little differently. This is by Harold Fiske, done for the Army Corps of Engineers in 1944. And in each band of color that you're seeing here is one moment in time showing the full range of the river's movement. And that movement is not subtle. Look at it. It's dramatic. For context, the narrow dimension of the river, so the width of just one of these bands, measures up to 2,000 meters, or 7,000 feet, just to give you a context of the scale. And yet we don't treat this dynamism as the river's natural or normal condition. We treat it as an inconvenience, an aberration, a problem to fix. And so we design channels and levees in order to tame and to contain the river into a line, to force it into the image of its misrepresentation. And of course, what ends up happening is that, inevitably, the river continues to behave as a river does. Over time, it swells, it overflows, and these same design systems end up failing over and over and over again, as they did in the devastating floods of 1927, in 2005 with Hurricane Katrina, when the levees were breached, in 2016, in 2019, and these events are becoming more and more frequent as climate pressures intensify, not because rivers have changed, but because our designs refuse to. In the words of my mentor, the late Anuradha Mathur, a river only floods when we designate the channel. Otherwise, it simply does what it does. It rises, it falls. The same misreading could be applied to fire zones, coastal edges, mountain buffers, places where we mistake momentary stability for permanence. For much of modern Western history, we've designed as if the world were something we could hold still, as if life moved at a single speed, as if conditions repeated themselves, as if change were the exception and not the rule. But just as we saw with the river, the living world tells us a completely different story. The problem is not change or dynamism or complexity. It's the growing mismatch between how the world moves and how we've been trained to perceive it, value it, and design for it. This is the core illusion of modern design. that we can hold our form forever if only we engineer hard enough. But nothing alive survives by staying the same or by surviving alone. And the most direct evidence of this is, of course, in our bodies. We come into this world feeding on another body. We move through this world breathing each other's air. And eventually, when it's time, we return to the world as soil. These are not metaphors. These are design systems, metabolic ones that we're all a part of. And these ideas have been known by indigenous and land-based cultures throughout millennia, including our own ancestors of the Arax River Valley, who understood the river as alive and called her Maid Arax, Mother Arax, recognizing living systems as relational, interdependent, and as shared. At its core, my work not only attempts and invites people to see the dynamism of the living world, but it invites them to participate in it. A 3-part design series and forthcoming book that I've been developing for the past few years takes these questions on in the most intimate scale of our bodies, to ask us to imagine how we may co-evolve and invent new and future forms of coexistence between us and the rest of the living world. The first prototype in this 3-part series, titled Posthuman Habitats, responds to the planetary condition of depleting soils and imagines how we may grow food in the future if the ground is not viable anymore. I conceived of the project following the birth of my daughter Zabel, a time when I was keenly aware and astounded by my body's ability to produce and deliver the exact nutrients that she required. I began to wonder how we may use our bodies to feed more than just our kin. Posthuman Habitats is a wearable and edible landscape system powered and fertilized by human waste and doubling as an expanded ecosystem that attracts other animal and insect life. It's made with moisture retention felt. This is a technology that's used throughout the world to create green walls and vertical gardens, and yet its application on the body had never been tested before. And I collaborated with a hydroponics expert to ensure that the prototype worked. I do this a lot in my projects. They all function, even if they have no reason to. It's the architect in me. So each of these cloaks produced about 40 pounds of crop, or 20 kilos of produce, and 22 different crops were grown on each. Everything from strawberries, nasturtium, broccoli rabe, lettuce, radish. And I collaborated with a chef who harvested one of the cloaks and served finger fruits during the opening night of the exhibit where this was featured. We like to think of ourselves as being outside the food chain, despite being host to millions of microbial organisms that are both nourished by our interiors and our exteriors, and which are essential to our survival. Here you're seeing all the organisms that are a part of our food production system. They're all required for our food to grow in the ground. Everything from the scale of a microbe to pollinators. And these species and creatures are slowly disappearing from our earth. By bringing these to our body and sheltering them, I think of the human not as separate from its ecosystem, but as one ecosystem among many. Our bodies host others. We are already composite beings. Yet modern design likes to think of the human and the body as somehow separate, sealed, and enduring. COVID-19 made this painfully clear. We are porous to each other's air and to our environments. The air we breathe has already passed through oceans, mountains, combustion engines, and the bodies of strangers. In fact, as I'm standing here speaking, you are all inhaling my exhale. Weird, right? And in every breath that we put out into this world, there's about 4 to 6.3% water content, meaning that if we were to theoretically harvest this liquid, each of our bodies could produce about 1 liter of water per day. This was the idea behind the second prototype in the series called Transcorporal atmospheres, which designs a system that harvests the moisture from human breath and feeds it to a shiitake mushroom that lives in its interior. Now, there's 2 reasons why I'm working here with a shiitake mushroom. The first is that it's a known water filter. So as the liquid from the breath passes through its body, it will filter out the impurities, making it available for wider use within a larger community. The second reason is that common to desert animals and plants, which have adapted to low water conditions in the desert, say, the shiitake undergoes a process known as metabolic water production. As it's eating away at the strata it grows on in its digestive process, it actually generates water in its body that it then secretes out of its skin. So here, essentially, the human and the mushroom are collaborating to create water in a near-future scenario where our access to water has been diminished. A near-future scenario that's very much a reality in parts of the world today, and increasingly becoming so with the heavy water usage of AI systems that we're seeing globally. So this vessel that was designed, the outer shell has openings, so you bring your mouth to it and you exhale into it. And I collaborated with a microbiologist and a mycologist to design the inner tubing that would create a capillary effect to pull the moisture from the human breath into the center of the vessel to feed the shiitake. The blue light helps the mushrooms grow, is why everything is drenched in it. And 60 days worth of the liquid that was generated through this system was recently exhibited in New York City. So each bottle that you're seeing here is 1 day's worth of liquid that was created in this collaborative system. And in fact, this system also has a provisional patent underscoring the significance of speculative methods in creating the potential for real-world impact. So while these 2 projects are trying to imagine ways of co-survival between us and the rest of the living world, the end result of metabolic systems and processes is not necessarily survival, but constant and continual transformation. We design obsessively for how we live in this world, yet we design almost nothing for how we might die. Like the dynamic river, we treat death as a problem to solve or to postpone indefinitely, to seal away, to sterilize. But in doing so, we don't eliminate death. We simply push it out of sight, onto other bodies, other species, other places. While extinction is not evenly distributed, death is the ultimate equalizer. Within moments of death, the boundary between the body and the world dissolves. Tissues soften, cells rupture, microbes that were once collaborators switch roles to digesters. the body slowly liquefies back into soil chemistry, into nutrient that will support future roots, future seeds, future breath. This last prototype demanded that I turn my attention to death. Titled Future Kin, it asks us how to die well in the mess that we've made and in the foreshadow of our inevitable end. Here I'm collaborating with the underground food chain to consider the future relationships that we might form with the soil biome, thinking of soil not as a resource, but as kin. Because here I'm working with the scientific fact that most of the microbial life in our gut is actually found in soils. And these are not soils that we've come into contact with in our lifetimes, but it's passed down through the mother's side in childbirth. So in our gut, we hold the microbial life of ancestral soils. A potent theme for those of us who have been expunged from our ancestral lands through acts of genocide and ethnic cleansing. In the exhibit where the part of this piece was shown, there was a cubic foot of soil. This is the amount that a single body would generate in the process of mortuary composting. Alongside was a clay vessel that was designed to cocoon the dying body in its first stage of decomposition. Speakers embedded in the cocoon amplified the sounds of decomposition as insects and microbes ate away at the organic matter in its interior. Screens embedded in the soil cataloged gestures of care that were collected from the public earlier, that had asked them to work with the therapeutic qualities of clay to process the current moment, full of atrocities across the globe, from genocides to ecocides, wars and famines, not very different, unfortunately, to where we are today. This project treats death not as an endpoint, but as a continual process of decay and recomposition. In the words of Matthew Evans, we are only temporarily not soil. Death is not the opposite of life. It is the mechanism by which life continues. All three of these projects in the series titled Near Extinction Rituals tie us back into the metabolic systems that exceed us. When we talk about resilience or sustainability today, what we're actually really asking is, how long can we stay exactly as we are? Even the word sustainability is made up of the terms sustain and ability, the ability to sustain. But what is it that we are sustaining? The planet is not asking us how long we will last. It is asking us how we will participate. The design question of the next century should no longer be, how can design sustain the planet? Or even, how can it save the planet? But a much more precise and much more difficult one. How should we design our own extinction ethically? Thank you.